On to something more serious, the Breckland Enduro, round one of the British Championships held on the 6th and the 7th of March. And of course we're in the Thetford Forest and the event is organised by the DIS MCC. Let's see who's riding what this season and who's been promoted. Number 1 is Neil Boker. The Kawasaki rider there is Joel Mitson. He's changed from TM. Edward Jones was the top clubman rider last year and he's come straight into the championship class. Another rider who's changed bikes, Tim Lewis, he was with Husky Sport, he's now with TM and on a 250. David Knight rode his first championship series last year and finished runner-up. He's going to be a serious contender this year. Cy Higgins won the expert class, so he's been promoted. John Shirt has upped the power this year on his gas. He rides a 300. But what is more important is that he's managed to persuade the reigning champion, Ady Smith, to come and ride gas. Ady won the series on a Yamaha 250 and he goes in the same class this year. I told you earlier that Wyn Hughes is going to ride the Gilles Relay this year. That was last weekend. He had bad luck out there. Bike going all right now, Wyn?
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Yeah. Don't crash this weekend, will you?
I'll try not to.
Right on the last check, wasn't it?
Yeah, last check on it.
What, you'd have been 6th or a bit better?
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh. Helping you.
You want better luck today?
I do. Much.
In fact, the rider who's going to win the series this year, I know he'll have to be good, but he'll need a bit of luck as well. So we start the first round of the British Championship, the Breckland Enduro, and it's a game of follow the leader really through the trees. But you can't hang about. Remember last year on the first day, most of the riders lost time. There were only 2 riders in the open 4-stroke class, Phil Smithson number 32 and John Deacon number 33. John was riding a 540 KTM. And like most of the riders in the championship class, these 2 went clean on the go-in. Phil was riding a Husaberg 500 and after the first test he was only a couple of seconds down on John. John did a very fast second test and that really clinched it. He beat Phil by nearly 50 seconds. The top 4-stroke rider, though, was Jason Fraser from Truro on a Yamaha 400. Jason beat John Deacon on all 4 tests, and at the end of the day, he was nearly 40 seconds up on Deeks. His nearest rival in the class was Chris Walton, 28 seconds down, and Jason finished 9th overall on the day. In the 125s, Gareth Jones was giving his son Edward a pep talk.
Well, hopefully with a bit of advice.
Lose another minute.
Get up another gear. Have you lost a minute?
No, he used a minute.
Just use a minute.
2 minutes, but not lost and penalised yet.
This is very tight now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be hard workers.
Remember Edward straight up from the clubman class. He had used a minute on a couple of the tight checks, but he was clean on the go-in. In his class, on the first test, he did the 2nd fastest time of the day, but slowed on some of the others to finish 5th overall in the 125s. Just over 6 seconds ahead of Edward, and in 4th place was top trials rider Wayne Braybrook. Wayne was riding a Honda 125. Yamaha rider Rowan Jones finished in 3rd place. It was very close between him and Braybrook. After 4 special tests, there was only a 1/10 of a second in it. There was a much bigger gap between 2nd and 3rd in the 125s. Joel Mitson on the Kawasaki, he finished in 2nd place and beat Rowan by over 14 seconds. Joel put in 4 very consistent test times. He did make 1 mistake during the day, but fortunately not on the special test. The top 125cc rider was Andrew Edwards from Wrexham, and he was riding a Honda. After 4 special tests, the gap between him and Mitson was less than a second. Although Andrew won the class, on the day he finished down in 10th place. The Breckland does favour the bigger bikes. In the 250s, Rob Meek finished in 4th place. He was riding a Gas 300. He'd only been on the bike for a couple of hours. That was last weekend, and he'd managed to break the front mudguard.
Haven't broken anything yet. Bit off you now. Well done.
This Breckland test is one of Rob's favourites. His first test was rather slow, 20 seconds off the leader, but he was 3rd fastest on laps 2 and 3. Wyn Hughes on the Alpha 250 and riding number 26. He looks set to beat Rob Meek, certainly after the first 2 tests. Wyn could have finished in the top 3, but everything went wrong on his 3rd test. That mistake dropped him down to 8th place. 3rd in the 250s and 3rd overall on this first day was number 17, John Shirt, riding the Gas 300. John's first test of the day was the slowest one for him, 410 seconds. After 4 tests, he beat his teammate Rob Meek by just over 3 seconds. I'm sure John would have liked to have finished runner-up on the day, but there was a small consolation. The rider who beat him was his teammate, the reigning champion, Ady Smith. Although the check times weren't quite as tight as last year, Ady had more time than most to spare. Smithy's first test was a bit slow, 408 seconds. That put him down in 5th place. He was 2nd fastest on all of the other 3 tests, and at the end of the day he beat John Shirt by 16 seconds. But he was a long way behind the leader, David Knight.
Having a bit of trouble staying with David Knight.
Oh, yes.
Flying, didn't he?
Yeah.
The Manx man was certainly in a class of his own. After the first test, he was 12 seconds up on the rest of the field. While practicing, he had hurt his wrist.
All right, David? Wrist all right?
He certainly looked on form, no problems on the going, even on the tight checks. Some of the riders were using their minute, but for David, well, he had 1 or 2 to spare. Out on the test, he just destroyed the rest of the opposition. After the first lap, he was 12 seconds up. On test 2, he beat everyone else by 6 seconds. Then on lap 3, another 10 seconds between him and the rest of the field. And then on the final test of the day, I think someone must have told him to slow up just a little. He beat Ady Smith there by just 3 seconds. David won this first day of the Breckland very convincingly. He'd beaten the reigning British champion Ady Smith by over 32 seconds. Route for day 2. Had it been wet here before?
Yeah, I've never seen it come.
Geraint, you've ridden this event for years. Have you ridden a wet one yet?
No, not like this.
No.
Had a heavy shower at the end,
Yeah,
but never like that.
Could be interesting.
I think it'll be a slot.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so narrow.
Yeah.
The change in the weather made all the difference. The going was very sticky, and only 11 in the clubman class went clean. 50cc rider for the 2nd day running is Kevin Murray, and he took the Premier Award in the clubman class. It was also tough for the experts. Quite a few had gone clean yesterday, but only 20 made it today. Parts of the test were one narrow rut, and it caught a few riders out.
Just like that, was it? A bit further on, but the same sort of thing.
Try and remember that shot. I'll explain later. It was also slippery on the go-in. That was a rider in the Genus Motorsports team. I thought it was a day for keeping your feet on the pegs, but Jack Johns thought different. In the four-stroke class, only two riders went clean. One of them was Chris Tett and the other was Stephen Grimshaw. Stephen riding a Honda 400. He won both tests, so won the class today, but Chris had finished second yesterday, so he took the Premier Award in the four-stroke class. Stephen was the top rider for Genus Motorsports. That pleased his teammates.
You look better on the bike now.
In the 125, 7 riders went clean. Steve Hunt, number 49, finished in 4th place. After his first test, he was lying second. But one mistake on the second test cost him those 2 places. Second and third in the 125s was a battle between 2 Suzuki riders, Wyn Hope, number 55, and William Jones, number 54. Going into the second and final test, William had nearly a 5-second lead over Hopi. The man from Raider really liked these conditions. He won the second test by 6 seconds, so Hopi finished second in the class and William Jones was third. And those 2 riders were beaten convincingly by the top 125cc rider, Stevie Roper from Halstead. He won both tests, and at the end of the day he was 42 seconds up on the rest of the field. In the 250s, 11 riders went clean. Chris Hooper, who finished 4th yesterday, was 5th today. He'd had a ripping time somewhere. It was very close for 3rd and 4th between Steve Saunders on the Gas and number 79 Mark Davis on the Kawasaki. Steve won the first test by 3.5 seconds, but he wasn't quite quick enough on the second. So Saunders finished in 4th place, a better result than yesterday when he was in 7th. And Mark Davis, who'd won the class yesterday, was 3rd today. The TM rider, Simon Evans from Wrexham, liked this sort of going. Yesterday he'd finished in 3rd place and today he was 2nd. He finished the day 10 seconds in front of Mark Davis, but Simon was a long way off the leader, who was Chris Hockey. Chris had blown his chances yesterday by dropping a minute on the going, but he made no mistakes today though. He won the class by over half a minute. Would Ady Smith like the weather today?
You've never ridden a wet Breckland, have you?
No, I don't think I have.
No. Be interesting today.
Smithy was good in any weather, but for Wyn Hughes these were ideal conditions.
You'll enjoy today though, being wet. You've never had a wet Breckland before, have you?
No, we haven't.
No.
Wyn needed a good result. He'd only finished 8th yesterday. For Ady Smith, this was going to be a day he would want to forget. In the early part of the morning, everything was okay. He was well up on time. And after the first test, he was in 3rd place. But then Ady's bike developed an electrical fault and he was out of the event. In the open 4-stroke class, although John Deacon was looking good early in the morning, by the end of the day he'd lost 2 minutes on the going. Phil Smithson was also a minute down and a little bit slower than John on the tests, but Phil took the honours on this second day. In the 400cc 4-stroke class, it was between Chris Walton, number 31, and Jason Fraser, number 30. Both of them were clean on the going. Chris won the first test by 5 seconds, but after that he didn't go quite so well. He was nearly a minute slower on his second test. Jason went on to win the class by just over 30 seconds, and for the weekend he finished in 8th place overall. In the 125s, Mark Chapman was on home ground, but not like in these sticky conditions. He was also a minute late. Joel Mitson had finished runner-up yesterday, but today he was down in 4th place. It was really his final test of the day which let him down. The Honda rider Wayne Braybrook moved up a place from 4th to 3rd. And runner-up in the 125s on this second day, Rowan Jones from Llanidloes. Rowan had finished 3rd yesterday. He'd had a couple of problems on the test. His cousin Edward was down in 5th place today. Done some good test times, but a minute down on the go-in. Rowan finished 3rd after the first test. He won the second one. Going into the final test, Rowan was the leader in the class. He wasn't quite fast enough, so Andrew Edwards took the Premier Award.
Your sponsor's looking very serious, Andrew. He doesn't like the weather.
You?
No, not really.
Andrew riding a Honda 125 and sponsored by Ray Hockey. He was wearing a bin liner for part of the morning, but that didn't last very long. He won the first test, nearly 5 seconds up on Rowan. He was slower on lap 2, but did win the final test of the day and beat Rowan by just over 2 seconds. In the 250s, Rob Meek finished in 5th place. That was 1 lower than yesterday. Rob was off the pace a little on his second test. Riding for Honda Britain, Mark Vaughan improved 2 places on day 1. He finished 4th on this second day. Vaughan finished 10 seconds ahead of Rob Meek. He is the reigning 125cc champion, but this year on a 250. The Gas rider John Shirt finished 3rd on day 1 and also 3rd on day 2. Shirty would be very pleased with his result, but disappointed that Ady Smith hadn't finished. This was a better day for Wyn Hughes. No mistakes on the test.
Don't go in the one you went in yesterday, Wyn.
No.
Yesterday, that one mistake had put him down in 8th place. Today, he was going to finish runner-up, but it was quite close between him and John Shirt. It all went wrong for Wyn on the final test, and right by the line. Obviously, he lost several seconds, but still managed to beat John Shirt by 2. Well, David Knight had won the first day convincingly, and he was odds-on favourite to win the second. He did make a slight detour early in the morning, but once he was back on course, there was no stopping him. David won the first test easily. He was 15 seconds up on the rest of the field. He even passed riders on the test. On lap 2, something went seriously wrong and he finished down in 3rd place. It happened in the bomb hole. No, this is not David, but the result was something similar. But David had launched himself off the top.
Further on, but the same sort of thing.
Even with that big mistake, David was still leading the class when he went into the final test. He had to pass Rob Meek on the way round, but still won the test easily and took the Premier Award for the 2 days. The runner-up overall was John Shirt, and he's just received his trophy from Paul Ranson.
my age is still a little bit sweet. So no, I'm amazing result really. Got smacked over the wire as well. I'm not sure really.
David Knight comes up to receive his award.
Rumour came back to me that you had a quick off in the ball hole, is that right? There's also another rumour that came back to me about the language afterwards for the first 10 seconds. Is that right? Well or not? Don't repeat it, just say yes or no.
Yeah, probably.
Someone said the air was blue. So that's the first round of the British Championship.